Hello, everyone. This is Alvaro Cortez Jr., aka Lance Danger. I am a webcomic creator, independent comic book creator. Been doing comics for over 15 years now, and it is Thanksgiving Day Eve. Well, for us that have daylight saving and all that stuff, like in Puerto Rico and other places in the states that doesn't have daylight saving, it's already Thanksgiving, which in that case, happy Thanksgiving. I just wanted to do a relatively quick little chill stream, just kind of talk a little bit about Masters of the Universe Revelations. I finally saw part two today, and I just wanted to show you guys some sketching I've been doing with my left hand, which is my non-dominant hand. So I thought that would be kind of something to just talk about. As usual, if anyone hops on to the chat and wants to be a part of the stream, just let me know and I'll send you the link to hop in here as well. Anyway, Masters of the Universe Revelations. It's a loaded topic. Like, it's one of the most divisive, loaded geek topics probably since the sequel trilogy to Star Wars, which I haven't finished, by the way. I only saw the first one by J.J. Abrams. I haven't seen the last two yet. I haven't seen Rogue Squadron nor Solo either so far, and I haven't watched the whole Mandalorian. I've only seen the first episode. It seemed cool. I just haven't had that much time to get into everything, and also with Star Wars, I kind of need a refresher because it's been so long since I've seen the movies, and I'm not like a huge Star Wars fan. I'm more of a casual Star Wars fan. Like, I have seen the movies at least once, and I really haven't seen them again since I was a kid. The only ones that I saw recently was with my girlfriend maybe a couple years ago. Episode four. We intended to see at least the original trilogy. I've been wanting to actually watch the whole saga, including the prequels. I haven't seen the prequels since it came out in the theaters, actually. Not being a huge Star Wars fan, I think that helped me see the prequels with a different set of eyes. I didn't really hate this prequels as much as many of the hardcore Star Wars fans did. Like, I just saw them as like interesting fantasy space opera movies. I didn't really get really into the Star Wars culture in that sense. So I have a lot of catching up to do with that. And there's quite a bit to talk about Masters of the Universe Revelations. First off, I thought it was meh. Like, it's okay for what it was. It's a little bit disappointing that in the beginning it was sold as a sequel to the original, a continuation of the original He-Man. But then they had to backtrack and say that it was actually a reimagining of it, which makes sense because as far as I understand, there's like a big whole legal mess with the rights to the Funimation property. So they had to kind of do the best that they could do within their limitations with the stories and not do too many like throwbacks to the original Filmation stories or not like reference any one thing in particular of those episodes. Like, first, let me like talk about the things that I liked. The animation was amazing. The animation really is one of the best animations for a Western animated series that I've seen in a long time. And of course, they borrowed a lot from anime and whatnot. And it's the same studio, I believe they're called Powerhouse, that made the animation for the Castlevania animated series for Netflix as well. So it's a good studio. It's a fantastic animation studio. I mean, the animation, the visual effects, a lot of the fighting scenes in part two was yes amazing. It really was, especially when. Well, I'm just gonna say it right now. There's going to be spoilers more than likely talking about this. So if you haven't watched parts one or two, um, spoilers beware. Just giving you enough time to click away if you're watching it, and if you don't want spoilers. Okay, so one of the things that I really liked, one of the scenes was pretty much Savage He-Man fighting against Skelegod. That was actually pretty cool. Like that was a very good action sequence. And of course the final battle sequence as well was very good. Like it was just on point. It was exciting. It was just great action when the action was there. And in the smaller moments the animation was great too, being very expressive when a character is sad or angry or just pensive. It just really great animation. The animators, the directors, the character designers, just bravo. That was just a spectacular series to just look at. It really was. Story wise, it was interesting. It was an interesting take on the myth of, you know, the story. Uh, it's just so complicated to an extent. Like, I wish I liked this series more than I did. I really do. It's just like so many thoughts come to mind at the same time. And if you follow me on Facebook, I already kind of put my thoughts out there on parts one and two. Well, like actually verbalizing it, it's like, oh my goodness, it just kind of like takes you back. It makes you think about everything that you saw, at least in my case. Well, the story had great potential. There were some very intriguing plot lines in that story. You know, Tila finally finding out that Sorceress is her mother, finding out that Prince Adam is He Man, the king finding out that Prince Adam is He Man and whatnot. Skeletor finally getting the Sword of Power and the power of Grayskull. Orko kind of given a bit of a serious story arc also, even if it was very small. Man at Arms, Duncan. I wish there was more of him in the show. To be honest, like he was probably to me he was actually the best character consistently through in both parts, even though his um, participation was very minimal. But I guess in a way it kind of makes sense because he is referred to in both parts as the most dangerous man in Eternia. So I guess they kind of had to sideline him in both parts to an extent, just so that He-Man, Tila, Andra, and all these characters will be able to have the spotlight as well, especially with Prince Adam not really being He-Man much at all in this series. He was only really He-Man in the first episode of part one and in the last episode of part two. So there wasn't that much He-Man to go around to speak of, to be honest. And like a lot of those kinds of storylines where the main hero is sidelined, it is interesting to see the other background characters and secondary characters like rise up to the occasion as well. But I feel like no character really was developed enough. like my main complaint about Masters of the Universe, it was way too short, and they crammed in a lot of information, a lot of things into it, and I guess they probably could have gotten away with it, except that they had the mindset or the assumption that people already knew the backstory of the original Filmation He-Man, maybe even the reboot that happened in the 2000s, and also assuming that people knew like the obscure references to the toy line and the comics and the toy lines as well. So at least I feel that that potentially alienated a lot of people that weren't familiar with the mythos, because if you weren't familiar with the story of He-Man, you're going to be lost, especially when there's like big moments where big characters, or at least popular secondary characters, die. You know, like Fisto and Clamp Champ. I forget his name from the first part. I always refer to him as Swamp Thing anyway. I don't really remember the actual name, but again, my own fault for always referring to him as Swamp Thing. But it was the character that he can, Mossman, I think it was called, the character that he was able to grow plants and stuff like that. You know, and things like that really just takes away from it, because even though I know a lot about the mythos of the story, it's just it's even more frustrating because it's, you see the potential that was there for a great story to be told, especially with these characters, and they have Ram Man finally appear in the final episode, and he's voiced by Danny Trejo, and it's only like one line. It's like, what? You got Danny Trejo to voice Ram Man, and he's only going to be in the last battle like for a minute? That's messed up. Like, there were so many decisions that I didn't understand for this show, and that was one of them. That the creators were in this already assuming that people were familiar with the plot lines and the characters, even the obscure characters of He-Man, and that is not the case, especially with the bit of promotion that was being given as a sequel at first of Masters of the Universe, and which it clearly wasn't. It really was a reimagining to an extent, and that just brings me to the point that it should have been longer. Like 10 episodes was way too little compared for the massive kind of story they wanted to make. And it would be fine if it would be just like one or two characters, I guess, that they're going to do the story, like maybe Prince Adam and Tila. But you have Eternia, you have Evelyn having a storyline, Orko had a mini storyline, Beastman has kind of a small subplot as well. And you can't throw that much characters, that much lore into just 10 episodes. Especially if it's those 10 episodes is just going to be one season. Like, this is something that easily could have been 3 seasons minimum. And in my ideal world, it would be 3 seasons of at least 12 to 25 episodes each. And I'll explain why. The first season, since it's a reimagining of the story of He-Man, just take a first season, 12 episodes, reintroduce the characters for the current audience, give them time to develop and give the time for the story to breathe. you know like, they obviously really borrowed a lot from Star Wars, and uh, I'm blanking on whatever else it was that they had borrowed from, because I know they borrowed a lot from Star Wars and Conan. they borrowed a lot from Star Wars and Conan, and I think that if they were going to borrow so much, they could have also borrowed from something like Lord of the Rings as well, and in the sense that that first season, 12 episodes, reintroduced the characters, introduced the world that you're trying to establish within this new continuity, and just have people get um old fans kind of like reconnect to the characters and have new viewers get exposed to these characters and know how they are, their personalities, uh, give them time to connect and feel for them. Because when things happen later on, you really don't feel much. I mean, fine. There's a lot of the old fans that really liked it, and that's great. Like, I liked it myself. I didn't like it as much as I wish I could have liked it. But again, it was all in the pacing. 12 episodes, reintroduce the characters, set the boundaries and the rules for this new world that you're creating, and that would have been fine. That would have been perfect actually, because it would have caught up the new viewers with the story and the mythos, and it would have been a nice refresher and throwback for the older viewers as well. And then the second season, 12 to 25 episodes, kind of like an anime or something. Do something very, like the first season could be very Fellowship of the Ring. You present the plot, you present the dangers, you kind of drop hints at what's going to come in future seasons. You know, very Fellowship, resolve whatever is happening in the first season storyline with the main characters, with the other characters, and let people fall in love with the characters and this world and build it, you know. And then season two, that's where the stakes are going to be higher, because with people connected to these characters and this world, people are going to feel it more, and it's going to feel bigger when something big happens, like a character dying or a place getting destroyed. Like for example, like it would have been much more impactful if you have all this storyline presenting the characters and introducing them, and then in the first few episodes of season two, He-Man apparently dies fighting Skeletor in a final battle. It would have had so much more weight to it, and it also would have given time for Tila's character to develop as well, because one of the main complaints about Tila in the first season, in the first part particularly, which I actually didn't find that bad, was her reaction to finding out that Adam was He-Man. The King's reaction also to finding out that his son was He-Man and whatnot. Even though it could have been handled a little better, in my opinion, it's understandable why she would get mad, because people do grieve differently when someone passes away. And and, and like I stated before, when I expressed my thoughts on social media about part one, Tila was a character that's always kind of had that sad sense of abandonment, abandonment from her mother, Sorceress, her father. Duncan was pretty much her adoptive father. I don't recall if canonically Duncan was her father in the original story. I think it kind of varies from the animation and the comic, but at least in this story in Revelations, he is her father. So she had been shielded her whole life from knowing that her best friend is He-Man. Man at Arms was her father, and Sorceress was her mother. And at that point, she didn't even know that Sorceress was her mother, or that Duncan was actually her father. He was just an adoptive father figure for all she knew. So yeah, she's going to have issues, and she is going to feel abandoned when Adam died. Again, especially since they were so close to each other. That is understandable. Sometimes some people react that way to losing someone, whether it be a death or just the family or friend that they've kept this big secret of for a long time, and they find out in the worst possible way. So I was always actually fine with that aspect of Revelations Part One, but it just felt rushed. All the whole story, the characters, the motivations, everything just felt rushed. Again, ideally, season two would have been 12 to 25 episodes where you can really digest everything that's happening, and it gives the story more time to breathe and the characters to be fleshed out more so that you can understand them better. And again, like leading into part two, part two would have been season three. Again, 12 to 25 episodes, maybe 12 episodes, where you confront Skilligod, and from season one up until season three, you can present that whole backstory of Evelyn um, being taken for granted by Skeletor, and show that gradual buildup and that gradual connection between her and Beastman to a point where it reaches a boiling point, and it wouldn't make sense for her to listen to Beastman and be like, I'm the current sorceress right now, and he has his powers through me in a way. I can really take over and lead all this, especially after he shows her the universe and she sees it as a sad, desolate place, and pretty much decides that the only way is death, the death of everything. Like, again, it would have been so much more impactful if you see from season one throughout season three how he has, like, in her words, physically and mentally abused her. Because again, it's the story is assuming that you already knew the relationship between Evelyn and Skeletor from before, which doesn't even matter much because it's not even canon with the other stories either. And since this is part of a reimagining, so it makes it even more important to have actually built that world up better and earlier than that. And then, again, like, and it would have been so much bigger if Orko as well, like in that mini storyline he had in part one, where Eternia lost all its magic, so Orko was slowly dying because he is a magical creature. And that was probably the best episode of part one, where Evelyn and Orko got separated kind of from the group, and they have like this small moment where they're talking together, and Evelyn is kind of reminiscing about how she became the way she was, and Orko was reminiscing on the way he wished he could have been in terms of his magic, and feeling like he's let people down and whatnot for not being as capable with his powers like he wished he could have been. Like, that would have been so much more powerful if that would have happened like in a couple of episodes, and then he sacrifices himself to save everyone like he did in that episode. And then it would hold a lot more weight when he comes back in the final episode and helps everyone out, and is finally able to use his magical powers correctly. Like it was a cool moment, but that's just what it was. It was just a cool moment. It wasn't like a get off of your seat clap kind of moment like it could have been if they had given more time to that story as well. You know, it would have been almost the equivalent of Gandalf the Grey coming back as Gandalf the White in a way. Which again, borrowing from Lord of the Rings, they could definitely could have gone that route since that was already that parallel there. And I think they definitely also took some inspiration from at least the movies of the Lord of the Rings. You know, and Andra was a confusing character because Andra, she kind of feels like Finn from Star Wars. Like again, doing like a comparison. Um, Finn was a character that was built up so much in the that first movie of the sequel trilogy of Star Wars, and from what I've observed and from what I've heard, he becomes like almost the background character in the last two movies. And Andra kind of goes through the same thing, oddly enough, in part two. Like, she was such a big character. It was almost hinted at that she was actually a relative of Hero, which was pretty much the first He Man in that, in, you know, in the lore of the Master of the Universe when they were in Preternia, which is their version of heaven. And it was almost like they were hinting at that Tila, of course, in the end, was going to end up being the new sorceress. But it almost felt like Andro was being built up as being the next He Man, to be honest, or at least that's how I was perceiving it. And then part two came, and aside from being like some comedy relief and kind of like the character to relate to as a viewer, she didn't have much of a big presence in part two, which is very odd. Like, I know there's conspiracies about, oh, that's just the animators and the producers and writers. They just rewrote and redid a lot of things because of the backlash of the part one. But it's like, my friends, to do that level of animation and that level of visual effects, there is no way that in such a short time they would have been able to turn that around and produce it. So even if they did change minor things according to public reaction, it wouldn't have been that much. It wouldn't have been to that huge scale because it was pretty much towards the end of summer, I believe, from what I remember, that part one came out and part two just came out like last week or earlier this week. So that it's too short of a time to like actually redo episodes. Like, I know it's not that many episodes, it was only 5 episodes, but unless it was like animators being chained to their desks, I really don't see how they would be able to turn that around so quickly. Like, there's really no possible way. The only thing that they probably could have changed would be maybe the dialogue at the end between Adam and Tila, and even that would be suspect. I don't think they would be, because going by the animation, unless they animated just that one scene at the end, and that wouldn't make sense. Like, I don't believe those conspiracy theories, to be honest, that a lot of things were changed because of the backlash. I do think that it was done the way it was done, but it was done very sloppily. Like, again, it needed more episodes. It really did. If they were going to go that route and not reintroduce the characters in a slow build, or at least at a pace that was good enough for people to get a grasp of how the characters and the world is, at least give more episodes to this, because they tried to cram too much story into just 10 episodes. And it's like I wrote on Facebook, at its best, it was a very cool, visually cool fantasy sci fi. at its worst, it felt like a very mean spirited fanfic because there were some things that were kind of eye rolling, like Orko dying the way he did, Sorceress being fooled the way she was in part one. Like, there is no way that Sorceress would just randomly open the gates and let He-Man in like the way that she did. Like, you can say that, yeah, it was, changing man or whatever he was called, or it was magic, but it's the sorceress and she's in gray school. She should have had some sense of something weird going on, especially since it was a celebratory day that Tila was being named the new man at arms in that first part of Revelations. Again, it should have been longer, in my opinion. It shouldn't have been just 5 episodes and 5 episodes. If they were going to go this route, it should have been a 10 episode season one and a 10 episode season two. And I think that would have allowed the story to develop a lot better with its pacing compared to how it ended up being now. Because there were legitimate problems with the pacing, that things just went too fast. Like ranges of emotions. Like, again, you have that part two when Tila has to turn into the new sorceress, and when she finally discovers that also that she's the sorceress's daughter, like there wasn't much time to digest that information. She went from randomly starting to use magical powers to trying to use it at a global scale to get Eternia to unite and fight against Skelegod and Evelyn, or it was called Darklyn, I believe, when Evelyn got the power of Grayskull. But I digress. It went from those two things to her confronting pretty much the spirit of sorceress when she's going to turn into sorceress. And again, it felt very forced and rushed. Like, that alone could have been an episode of Tila and Sorceress having that conversation and having flashbacks of how things happen, like, and trying to have like some kind of understanding between the two characters. But essentially, it just boiled down to Tila saying that she's not going to be confined to just Castle Grayskull, and that with the strength of her friends and family, she's going to be the most powerful sorceress to have ever lived, because she'll be able to leave Castle Grayskull as well at will as a human to help fight and whatnot. And it worked somehow. You know, it's things like that that's just, oh wow. Like, it's things like, it's decisions like that in the story that just makes you scratch your head. Like, how did that work? I mean, by that logic, no, Tila Ra, I believe, is the name of Tila's mother when she was sorceress. Like, by that logic, she could have just said, "The love of my life, Duncan, needs me, and I have to raise my daughter to be the next sorceress. With their love, I could become the biggest sorceress and just not be confined to the castle." So it doesn't make sense in that particular. I don't know. I'm just like reading too much into it, maybe, but in my opinion, that kind of didn't make sense. If they wanted to make some kind of storyline that, well, now she is overpowered and she can leave Castle Grayskull, Tila, as sorceress. There are other mystical and even cosmic characters in the He-Man lore that could have just popped up in there as well to help in the battle against uh, Darkland, and just say like, "Yo, Darkland is just too OP right now. I'm going to have to level up Sorceress to be able to leave the castle in order to defeat Darkland and Skelegod." But again, these are pacing issues that could have been solved if there were just more episodes. In the end, that is the biggest disappointment in Revelations, that it was a very promising story, but it needed more time to breathe and develop. As it is, it's a entertaining show, I guess. Like, I'm not mad that I watched it. I don't regret that I watched it. I don't think I'll watch it again unless I put it on as like background noise while I'm organizing stuff, or if I'm illustrating, because the score is actually pretty good. I really like the score in the show as well. And again, the battles and the fights were very on point. I really, really loved the animation on this show. So I don't know. I don't even know what to say at this point. And like, if you're a big fan of the original Funimation He-Man, I guess there's enough there to satisfy you to an extent. And if you're a newer viewer, there are elements that are going to lose you, but hopefully the animation will keep you going through the story. And eventually, you'll probably like the story or not. You should still give it a chance, I guess, if you're into sci-fi fantasy, and if you're fans of powerhouse animation as well, you can definitely give it a shot, because it really is gorgeous animation, in my opinion. Like, that was probably the best thing about this show. The animation and the cinematography and the animation is just stunning in a lot of the scenes. So in my opinion didn't change much from part one. I don't personally think it was as bad as some people say it is, but I don't think it's as great as some people make it out to be either. It's somewhere right around the middle, to be honest. It's entertaining enough to watch at least once, especially if like over Thanksgiving or the holidays or something. Um, you want to introduce someone that's not familiar with He-Man and you've been a fan, or if you grew up watching the show and you have a family of your own, you can definitely give that show a watch with your kids if you have any, and kind of have like that bonding moment of parent and child, I guess. So there's definitely that value in the show that you can definitely share it with other people and loved ones. So I guess that's the best recommendation I could give anyway, based on my opinion. Like, on a scale of 1 to 5, I would probably say it's a 3. Yeah, 3 is about right, I guess, because again, I didn't hate it and I didn't love it. So 3 is middle of the road pretty much, and that's pretty much what it was. Like, I wouldn't say it's below average, because like I said, the animation alone is spectacular, and there are story elements that have potential to be great, but I wouldn't put it above average because of how the story didn't develop enough. It fell kind of short in that sense. So I think 3 out of 5 is a good score. Maybe a 5.5 out of 10 or 5 out of 10. Like, I don't think it deserves the hate that's been getting in some places, but I don't think it's also the greatest thing ever. So if you just want mindless entertainment for about 4.5 hours, give or take, um, there are worse things on Netflix. There are worse things out there than Revelations, so you can definitely at least give it a shot. Um, that's my 2 cents on Revelations. And real quick, I also wanted to talk about some sketches I've been putting up this week. As I stated also on my social media, I kind of wanted to give a shot at sketching with my non-dominant hand, my left hand, because I was told a long time ago when I was taking classes at SVA. I think I've told this story before. We were doing a challenge. The students were given a challenge to illustrate with your non-dominant hand. So if you were right-handed, you had to illustrate um, for that hour or two with your left hand. If you were left-handed, you would have to illustrate with your right hand. And it's kind of an exercise in focusing and making assertive decisions with your line work and whatnot. Excuse me, especially when you're doing life drawing as well, to kind of like help you focus and loosen up in a way. And when we did the challenge, my professor at the time, legendary comic artist Phil Jimenez, he stayed looking at my sketches in particular. And he was looking real long and hard at them, like with a very serious kind of face. And I'm like, oh crap, what did I do? Like, it's probably the worst thing ever. And he just tells me, you know what? For some reason, when you're sketching left handed, fundamentally, you actually sketch better. Like, he said that he had his own theories about why that is, but that I should consider practicing with my left hand more often. And there's a lot of truth to what I guess he probably thought of back then. Um, when I was a little kid, I actually did start doing a lot of things left handed, but my parents and to an extent, some of my teachers actually forced me to do things right handed instead. Like, for example, if I was writing when I was learning to write and it was in front of my mom, like she would tell me that I was doing it with my wrong hand. So I would have to start all over again with my right hand instead. And sometimes, like, I do have a very recollection of a teacher also, like, when she saw me picking up the pencil with my left hand and starting to write with my left hand, I believe she also asked me like, "Why are you doing it with that hand instead? Maybe you should try your right hand." So I pretty much started writing and illustrating with my right hand, and um, sometimes when I wanted to get my homework done faster or whatever, I would actually, when I would get tired writing with my right hand, I would keep writing for a while with my left hand as well. At least when nobody was looking, because of course, if my parents would see me, would be like, wrong hand. And it didn't extend to just writing and doing stuff like that either. It extended into sports as well. When I was little and my father was around, when the few times that we would play catch and play baseball, whenever I would stand on the left side to hit, my father would actually get kind of low key mad. And he would be like, "No, you're batting on the wrong side. I'm not going to pitch until you turn to the right side." I'm like, okay. And part of it also is that I kind of admired switch hitters when I was watching baseball as a kid, because I thought it was pretty cool to just watch these athletes be able to bat from both sides of the plate depending on the situation. Like baseball really is kind of like a chess game in that sense. So I always kind of admired switch hitting batters and the very very few switch pitching pitchers as well. Um, there were far few. I don't even know if there are any anymore that would kind of sometimes, depending on the game or whatever, they would switch their pitching hand as well. So I'm a frustrated lefty, I guess. Like even till this day, as a grown up, even though I write and illustrate and do some things with my right hand, I do a whole lot more things with my left. To the extent where one year, as if you've seen my YouTube before, you'll know that like in 2015, I believe it was, um, I fractured this side of my hand. It was like a small hairline fracture, and I had to have like a half cast for like 2 weeks or something like that. And that was in the middle of finals when I was going to community college doing my associates in fine arts. And I had to catch up and do like four paintings in like 2 or 3 weeks. And it was crazy. It was very hectic. Fortunately, I had started the base of those paintings. So when I spoke with my professor and he saw that I already had the base of all those paintings done and that some of them were almost finished, he said, you know what, finish as much as you can, and when you finish, we'll see what happens. And fortunately, I was able to finish it. It was a lot of work because uh, it was a lot of work. Sometimes I would kind of like take the cast off a little bit to like do some things, but I did a lot of things with my left hand, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Like I finished everything on time, and actually, one of my paintings was shown in the art gallery of the campus as one of the student showcases. There's actually a YouTube video out there where I recorded that, and there's pictures around as well where that painting and a sculpture that I made it into the student showcase. I was actually one of the few students that actually have multiple pieces in there, which really was a big confidence booster in pursuing art and whatnot. With my goal at that time, which was to go through community college to hopefully be able to reach a level of getting into SVA. So, with that bit of context, um, I kind of started off left handed, but was forced to be right handed. And actually, my sister, she's left handed herself. Like, she didn't let anyone like try to correct her. Like, she was left-handed from the start and she has stayed left-handed. And I don't know how it would have been like if I would have done that myself as well, but it is what it is. And you know um when Phil Jimenez said that to me, it always kind of stayed in the back of my mind, like what if I do switch to illustrating with my left hand, or at least try and see how that would be like. And now after this year that's been so challenging, and that I've had to um, kind of work my way up through being healthy again after COVID. As most of you guys know, in April I had COVID. It was one of the worst experiences of my life when I had it. Um, After that, old injuries that I had got re-aggravated even worse. I have been told that that also could be a part of having had COVID because my body got so weak after I had COVID. Like, you wouldn't believe how weak I got after that, especially my breathing and my lungs. Right now, my breathing is semi normal again, but I have been struggling a lot with my breathing and all that. And again, my shoulder got re injured, and I've been going through the physical therapy. Hey there. Yes, my cat coming around to say hello. I guess he woke up and didn't see me sleeping. So if you hear like small bells going around or a random meow, that's what it is. But I digress. I lost my train of thought actually. Um, so anyway, that's the context for that. Yeah, like I was, yeah, now I remember going through COVID and going through these re-injuries of my shoulder and whatnot. Um, I am slowly starting to physically get to how I was before the pandemic and before I got COVID. Like, I'm slowly starting to get stronger. It's been very challenging, and since I don't have that much strength in my right shoulder, I don't have that much stamina to be illustrating very much, and sometimes the physical therapy and the exercises themselves kind of leaves me wiped out. I really haven't been able to draw like in the last it's almost been like a month and a half now that I hadn't been drawing because of that. So now that I'm slowly kind of starting to get into the groove again, and I have the range of motion back to normal in my shoulders, I'm just trying to build up strength and muscle on it so that my neck and my back and my hips don't overcompensate for the lack of strength in my shoulders. Um, I just wanted to experiment and just do it. Like, yes, what's the worst that could happen if I just kind of do like fundamental sketches and whatnot with my left hand? Just to see what happens and just to see how comfortable I may be trying to switch to left handed. And if you don't follow me on social media, I would like to show you the progress of illustrating with my left hand. Let me just go here. All right, as you can see here, this was the very first sketch I did um, after all those years with my left hand, just to see kind of how it looks like. And even though don't be fooled by just that one like in the comment, and actually other people that saw this illustration shared it. I shared it in other art groups and I showed it to some of my friends, and they're like, damn, that's you actually drew that. It's like, yeah, I drew it with my left hand. I sketched it with my left hand, and it's been very well received. This is Tim Drake, Robin, kind of giving inconspicuous look, like he's a little skeptical, like, I don't know if this guy can actually illustrate with the left hand. So I used my own face as a reference for it, as a one of the exercises that I take from an online illustration class that I've been a part of for the last couple of years. I just started from ground zero, from scratch, from the very first class of that online class, but with my left hand instead of my dominant right hand. So there's Tim Drake, and here is Supergirl. Now I chose Tim Drake, and Supergirl because they're kind of like the safe characters to actually draw because I used to draw Tim Drake all the time when I was a kid because of the Robin miniseries and the Robin series by Chuck Dixon, one of my all-time favorite comics. So of course I would draw Tim Drake all the time. Uh, I've always had a soft spot for Supergirl, especially when the Peter David Supergirl run came out with Gary Frank. Also, one of my favorite all time comics, Peter David, Gary Frank, Rick Leonardi, just a great writer and some very solid artists. Gary Frank, one of my all-time favorite artists, and Rick Leonardi was a solid replacement for Gary Frank after he left. So again, this Supergirl was also done with my left hand, and this is the one that I did today. This is Aqualad. Again, using reference, using those tactics from that class, and using my left hand. I'm just trying to keep challenging myself. I chose a character that I never sketched before, so I wanted to have like that extra challenge of sketching a character that I've never sketched before, left-handed. So those were the results of that small practice that I did today. There are elements that I liked in this one and in the Supergirl one as well that I may actually either redo them or scan them and ink them and in Clips Paint Studio. Excuse me, because there are really some elements that I like to these illustrations, especially the Supergirl one. Again, Supergirl, a character that I'm very comfortable illustrating, one of my all-time favorite characters. So I may work with this illustration a little bit more, either redraw it digitally or just scan this one and kind of fix it up and ink it as I go. And just to like show a little bit of the process. I just kind of wanted to show, let's see. I just kind of wanted to show the process of how I came to do the Aqualad illustration. Let me go ahead and take this out of the way. So yeah, this was the exercise that I have been doing today in particular for this pose for this sketch. Originally, I was just going to do that assignment for that video class, but I just wanted to like take it a little bit further and just kind of flesh it out more to being a full illustration rather than, or at least the more detailed sketch compared to the exercise, which was pretty much finding an action pose, uh, print it out so you can use it for reference, kind of like find that S line or that balance line where you can see where the character is arching and its action line and whatnot. So you can kind of illustrate around it. So that was pretty much that exercise. Like there's a better view of the reference that I was using as a guide for that illustration. And the homework consisted of doing three sketches based on that pose, done in 5 minutes or less each one. So this was like the first one. Here's the second one, and that was the last one that I did. And after doing that last one, that's when I was like thinking, that would be kind of like a cool Aquaman pose. But then I got to thinking again, and like into Aqualad is a character that I'm not, at least like this most recent incarnation of Aqualad, I'm not that familiar with. He has an interesting design, so I just thought it would be more challenging to do that version of Aqualad in this pose instead of like doing Aquaman or something like that, which is a character that I've probably sketched one or two times. Again, I actually really liked Aquaman growing up because, once again, Peter David's run and, of course, Grant Morrison's run on JLA, which coincided with the same character arc that Peter David was writing at the time. And I believe Marty England was the name of the artist. Fantastic artist. I wonder whatever happened to that artist. I would have to look up if to see if he's still doing work. At one point, he did a mini series for Tony Daniels when he used to have his F5 Entertainment comic book studio, which was pretty cool. Um, I'm just trying to think. I think it was Adrenaline, the character that Marty England drew for Tony Daniel. Now I have to double check that real quick. Just bear with me. Like I actually still have that trade paperback, and I adore that trade paperback to pieces. I haven't looked over it in a while because there are still some comics that I had packed up from the move earlier a couple of months ago. Yep, it was called Adrenaline Weapon of War. Tony Daniel cover, Martin England, Edeland, Martin Edeland. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that last name. I always butcher that last name for some reason. But yeah, like that artwork was fantastic. Really, one of my all-time favorite artists. Really, he did a spectacular run on Aquaman with Peter David, and again, Grant Morrison wrote a great Aquaman in JLA. So I was a fan of Aquaman back then. I really haven't read the Jeff Johns stuff. I suppose I probably should catch up with it one day. Um, yeah, I'll likely catch up with it one day, but for now, I have so much to catch up that I haven't read. Like, I have a pile of comics that I have not finished reading yet. So yeah, that's basically what I've been doing this week. I've actually been getting kind of into the groove in sketching left-handed. I'm going to continue to do so just to see where it leads. Like, I mean, I posted these illustrations on Twitter, and Phil Jimenez himself actually liked them and commented on them. Which really means a lot that we still like stay in touch, well, more or less as time permits, anyway. And even Jeff Johnson actually liked the Supergirl one, which was very surprising and humbling, and again, a confidence booster as well. So I think I'm heading in the right direction, and just again, just throwing it out there and challenging myself and trying to become better. You know, all this is so I can become better and hopefully um, help inspire other artists to take chances and take leaps as well and to challenge themselves to become better themselves as well. Because I need competition. I'm a very competitive person. I'll compete with myself I compete with myself all the time, and I compete with other colleagues as well. And it's a very good natured spirit of competition, like sportsman competition. Really, like it's not like malice or anything like that. Of like, ooh, I'm going to bring you down. It's more like, oh, I have to step up my game because this person is stepping up their game, and I don't want to be left behind. You know what I mean? Or in like oh, I should have thought of that myself kind of way as well. So I'm constantly trying to challenge myself in that aspect as well. um, it's kind of like Gary Vaynerchuk says, and ever since I heard him say that and like show it on his social media, it resonated with me so much. I don't want to be the tallest building by knocking down all the other buildings around me. um, I want to help elevate other people whichever way I can as well to, you know, that I'm not the only tall building. I want other buildings to be around me that are as tall or taller. That gives me something to aspire to as well, because that's what it is in life, keep improving and keep pushing forward and leaving behind a legacy worthy enough of other people to kind of try to follow in your steps or try to do better than what you had done before. And that's kind of the legacy I want to leave behind for myself as someone that tried to do things as best as possible, not just for myself, but for to elevate others as well. And I think with that message, it's a good um, ending to this chill stream right here. More than likely, I'm probably going to do one more class left-handed and call it a day. Um, I'll be likely uploading last week's podcast onto YouTube later today. So, as I said before, it's Thanksgiving now. So it's Thanksgiving here and Thanksgiving over there to anyone that has daylight savings or whatever or doesn't have it. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you guys have a great holidays with your loved ones, or if you're working during this holiday, I hope that you have a safe day, that you'll be able to go back home and share with your family, whether it be on the dinner table or whether it be on Zoom or Skype. Just take this time to, as cliche as it is, to be thankful, thankful for what you have, hopeful to get what you're aiming for, thankful to still have the people that you love around you, thankful that you were able to love and be loved by the people that aren't with you anymore. And just sit down and reflect on this whole year that's passed by like in the blink of an eye, and a new year is approaching. And I hope for health, prosperity, and love for every one of you that follows me and that watches me do all these crazy things that I do online, from podcasts to illustrations to the silly videos with filters. It's all done with love, my friends. Thank you so much. Cheers. Have a great one, guys.